Bienvenidos a Vox Terra. Make sure you're subscribed and you've clicked that notification bell. Today, Hurricane Ida and its aftermath. The climate mechanisms that drove it, the climate change mechanisms that is, what I call the 2-for-1 of the fossil fuel industry, and the results of an economy dedicated towards mundane consumerism. So starting with an article from Democracy Now!, August 30th, 2021, interview with investigative journalist Antonia Hujas, who tweeted on Sunday, and I love this quote. She tweeted on Sunday, Hurricane Ida, cutting through Louisiana's offshore oil and gas corridor and into Cancer Alley, Baton Rouge, and New Orleans. Areas congested with fossil fuels, petrochemical infrastructure, refineries, storage tanks, manufacturing pipelines, etc. And she says, and I love this, it has always struck me as the most painful of ironies that the industry contributing the most profoundly to the climate crisis has also located its operations in the heart of the region consistently overrun with global warming's worsening storms. So that's great, right? Because that says it all right there. You know, we can talk to her blue in the face about climate change and how fossil fuels have driven and initiated this climate change. But hey, regardless, however good that industry is at push back against that concept, when those storms come in and spill all those refineries and those toxic waste sites, they contaminate the water, the soil, and the earth with their toxic, carcinogenic contaminants. 2-for-1. Curbing climate change also curbs other toxic emissions and cancers. And not just that, but Louisiana's coast is also home to Superfund sites as well as a nuclear power plant. The storm brought a 7-foot storm surge, 150-mile-per-hour winds, and up to 2 feet of rain, knocked out power to 1 million people, including the entire city of New Orleans. Category 4 storm hit the same day Hurricane Katrina devastated the area some 16 years ago. Yet, even though this storm was as severe as Katrina in some ways, or more so, a system of dikes and levees that protects New Orleans region from rising waters is reportedly holding, built since Katrina, right? So that's another point to keep in mind. We are expending effort addressing disasters now. From the Washington Post, the remnants of Hurricane Ida tore into the Northeast, where a historic deluge caused flooding that killed at least 44 people. Okay, so you're seeing flooding in New York City basements, right? And that's another thing we didn't really used to see, flooding in New York City, but that's becoming more the norm in New York City. Flooding, that wasn't normal. That's why they had these basement apartments. But yeah, whatever climate change you've seen over your lifetime, especially if you're not young, you might feel distressed at the fact the media just tends to report it as like, oh, here's this really unusual, thing, but it's now usual, as if it's normal, as if it's always been that way. And from ABC News, this same storm system spawned tornadoes across the Northeast. See, again, spawned tornadoes across the Northeast. So we've seen this summer record floods in Germany, Japan, London, now New York City across the Northeast, and Hurricane Ida. So we're getting a real feeling of like anything, anytime, anywhere. And that's true. The era of predictable weather patterns seems to be receding. So what are these climate mechanisms? These climate mechanisms that are driving this? Well, in terms of hurricanes and tropical storms, I'm going to cite you to the Natural Resource Defense Council. But everything I'm getting here is also consistent with the U.S. Climate Assessment, NASA, NOAA, and so on. And I'm going to grab from 2018 just to point out, the media, the mainstream media, all of it, they could have been doing this as well. It didn't have to be Vox Terra. Anybody along the line for these past decades could have been explaining these climate mechanisms and, drumming up public awareness and public activism on this cause. As we continue to heat the planet by burning fossil fuels, we're altering both the Earth's longer-term climate systems and its shorter-term weather. Mechanism 1. Warm sea surface temperatures fuel hurricanes. A greater temperature increase means more energy for the storms. Number 2. A hotter atmosphere can hold and then dump more water. Number 3. Sea level rise increases the threat of storm surge. when powerful winds drive a wall of ocean water onto the land for coastal areas and low-lying nations. Okay, so that higher sea level now, when those heavier rains come, it's now already up higher than it was, so it's easier to push up into the settled regions now. And lastly, for this one, global warming is weakening the atmospheric currents that keep weather systems like hurricanes moving, resulting in longer, lingering storms. The fact the Arctic is heating more quicker than the rest of the planet is weakening that circulatory pull from equator to poles, as well as weakening the ocean currents. So this has been the big threat of climate change all along, not just a gentle sea level rise and a warmer planet, but it's the weakening of these atmospheric currents and oceanic currents. Now, I highlighted the tornadoes on the East Coast, new and unusual. It said that the hurricane spawned the tornadoes. Well, tornadoes are also heat related. Now, the exact attribution science is a little less certain on tornadoes, but we can all understand that tornadoes are heat driven. And according to Yale 360, and I've cited this elsewhere, Tornado Alley has been shifting eastward. So this heating planet is going to shift around where tornadoes hit, like it's shifting everything around. Now back to that issue about the dikes being built stronger since Hurricane Katrina. Not as many people in Louisiana died this time. Reminds me of a cover I saw in Newsweek, or maybe it was Time, some years back that said, the storms are getting stronger, but so are we. Well, that's not the attitude, okay? The attitude should have been cut fossil fuels, cut all this excess consumerism that is pumping our biosphere full of greenhouse gases and toxins, transition towards a greener economy, instead of just supporting business as usual, and then now we all spend our lives adapting for storm management and disaster relief. And it also brings to mind an interview I heard on Democracy Now! It was a government official from Bangladesh who talked about how the Western media, he might have called it, but I'll call it the business-dominated news media, really tends to ignore all of the climate change that's been hitting areas like his country for quite some time now, heavy, devastating floods. And there's 2 points to that. One, similar to the other point, well, he was explaining how Bangladesh now is much better equipped for evacuating people on massive scales from their monsoons, but that's how they're now spending their time. Because people didn't want to stop, people defended business as usual. But point 2, it makes me think about climate change disinformation and all of the money spent by those industries to stop efforts at change. And I think of a quote from a German friend when we had a conversation maybe 5 or 6 years back, and he said, I know it sounds selfish, but climate change is going to hit maybe he used the word third world, worse than the richer countries. And I said, how do you know that isn't just a point highlighted and emphasized by those disinformation industry, so we're not as concerned in the so-called richer countries? Getting to that frog in the pot of boiling water. So my hope for this video is that you can now more easily articulate the climate change mechanisms that drive extreme weather like hurricanes, fill in the gaps where the media isn't doing its job, and you have some strength in you and some spirit now to begin to, just message your local politicians at all levels and say you want stronger climate action. You want to ease away from fossil fuels, and you want to go towards a less polluting, less toxic, more natural, organic society economy. Just let them know that. That's my hope. Let them know people like us exist and we vote, and it's not just dismissers and deniers. Because they gotta hear from us. Politics and change is a noise and numbers game. Well, hey, until next time, please make sure you're subscribed and you've clicked that notification bell. You're giving thumbs up, you're commenting, you want to offer some constructive criticism, great. And as always, and until next time, peace be with you.